Hi, everybody. We are live here for Letter Appreciation Day, and we're going to have a really excellent time. We have two fantastic letterers that are going to be joining us for a great conversation. We have Janice Chiang, who has been around the business for a little bit of time, and she is still doing great and amazing things. We also have Ariana Maher, who's a well-established veteran who is doing also amazing things, especially a lot of the newer work she's been doing with Marvel. And I'm going to bring them in pretty quickly. One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about was that this is Letter Appreciation Day. It happens to be September 1st every year. I'm pretty sure it was Todd Klein, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm pretty sure that Todd Klein decided that we should make Letter Appreciation Day Gaspar Saladino's birthday. And so that is today. And every year I try to make sure that somehow I am celebrating the craft of lettering. A lot of people will say things like, a good letterer is invisible, and there may be some truth to that, but while bad lettering can ruin a book, good lettering can certainly elevate a book. And the people who are responsible and who are the people who are putting the words on our pages and sound effects and balloons and everything else that goes along with putting that together, sometimes they end up doing a lot of production work, are the pieces that without that we're not getting comic books. And so we need to celebrate them. They're often ignored or forgotten in certain ways, and I hate to say that, but they're critical and important to the industry. So enough of me. I'm going to bring in Janice Chiang, and she doesn't know I'm doing this, but last year during Women's History Month, I did a piece on Pop Culture Squad that kind of went through and talked about all of the different women in comic book history, and Janice is one of the most important women letterers in comic history. And one of the things I said about her is that she's an exquisite letterer. She has done work on. Her career began in the mid 70s, and we're going to get into her career and how that worked out. She's worked for DC, she's worked for Marvel, she's worked for First Comics. She did a lot of work with Milestone, and her craftsmanship is exceptional. And without any further ado, we're going to bring in Janice Chiang, who lettered most of my favorite comics from when I was a kid.
Thank you for that fabulous introduction. I'm actually blushing.
I, so, when I do this and I do have people on, Janice, I, go back and remind myself of the things that they worked on. And as I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, everything that I was reading from Marvel when I was a kid, you lettered, whether it was Alpha Flight, Dazzler, Iceman and Squadron Supreme are probably the two of my favorite things from the 80s Marvel. And Power Man and Iron Fist was fantastic. But you lettered Jim Lee's first Marvel work.
I did. Alpha Flight 70 something, I
I think
believe.
it's 52 or 3, somewhere around
52
there.
to 3?
Somewhere in
Okay.
the early, right around 50-ish. But yes.
Now he's a chief creative officer at DC Comics.
Exactly. Um, and you're also doing so much work today with Storm King Comics, and as well as DC and other things. Uh, Before we bring in Ariana, and I'm going to do that pretty quickly, could you go over or give us a little bit of a history on? And I'm going to bring in Ariana, I'm sorry, and so she can hear and see. We can see her. Welcome here, Ariana. Can you talk to us about how you became a letterer? How did you get in this business? Because I've heard it. I've heard the story before, and it's fantastic. So can you share with our listeners?
I'm an accidental letterer, actually. I
A lot of
needed a
people are.
job. I needed a job when I was in college. And my older sister, Faye Chang, was a good friend of Larry Hama. So he called her and said, she called him and asked him to help me out to get a job, whatever. So he and Ralph Reese taught me the fundamentals of lettering, what tools to use. This was hand lettering, right on the art boards. So I have a background in fine arts, so it was just like another art form for me It's, as Ariana, I don't know if you've done hand lettering. It's just a matter of like doing it, the practice you get in it. So I was in Neil Adams' studio like in the early '74. So that's where I learned because Ralph and Larry shared an office and they inked together as crusty bunkers when they took on jobs. And then Terry Austin and Bob Wycheck were there. They told me that like years later. Yeah, we were in the studio. I said I didn't notice you because my my way of doing things was like I go straight for it and I leave. I didn't go hang out.
Right.
It's like Sergio Agonis was like drawing. He actually remembered me. I met him up in San Diego Comic Con a couple of years ago. He goes to me, "Are you the little girl in Neil's studio?" I said, "Yes, I was that little girl." Thank you for remembering. So, I learned the skills at Neil's studio, and I would do like they would have commercial jobs for that they needed lettering. I did some of that, but I need a bigger workload, and Neil was kind enough to introduce me to the bullpen. You know,
Mhm.
refer me over. That's when I met Sue's dad, Danny, and he was the head of bullpen. So he took me under his wing, and I worked on staff where we did lettering corrections on the board, and you learn production values. But the most important lesson I learned from Danny was not like him saying, "Here, let me show you how to do this." One day I had to go to lunch, and I wanted to tell him I was going to go leave. So he did a lot of the logo and cover copy hand lettering. So he was talking on the phone and he was working on display lettering. So he had some pro white and he kept like working at it. He ignored me, right? But I think he was trying to teach me that you have to like tweak it until you get it right. So, standing him watching work, it's like, And I still remember that lesson now. Like when I do sound effects, I actually go in the distort window in Illustrator. I don't like line up sound effect fonts. And the fonts I use for sound effects are for my hand lettering. I translate it into digital fonts and I use that. At DC, we have to use approved fonts that, people can buy so for the body copy. But, like in the Monkey Prince and Duo series, all
Mhm.
those sound effects are, and DC Superhero Girls, all the books I lettered, they're for my hand lettering into digital fonts.
I love the Duo books. They were really beautiful.
Yeah, this is the first time I really got to work with Greg, and our artist is amazing. Our editor Andrea Shea. It's like I really love what we're trying to say through this
Yeah,
book, and it's
I
really fun.
I was I was talking with Chris Sotomayor, and he's been looking forward to that book coming out for a while, and was very nervous about it coming out and how it would print. Um,
Okay, fine.
yeah, no, it came out great, but like it was in the can for a while, and you never know how it's what paper if the paper changes between when you're drawing when you're coloring or not. Um, but you left lettering for a while, is that right? And then you came
Yeah, I
back.
did. So
What happened with that?
I went into at that time it was like right towards the end of the anti-war movement. I mean the Vietnam War, and I was interested in participating in the anti-war movement because on TV every night you would see footage of what was going on, and they were killing people that looked like me without a second thought. Napalm, Agent Orange bombs, bullets. So a lot of us of Asian American descent decided we needed to protest that. We're human too, and what is ironic or not ironic, because racism is institutionalized. The ugly head reared itself again during the pandemic, where we were scapegoated for you
Hmm.
know being the source. And ever since I was a kid, growing up in New York, my parents taught me to be on the lookout for danger. So it depends on the period of history where it's more intense or less intense. Every time I go out my door, I have my antennas up and the third eye in the back of my head, ready for any confrontation. It can be very subtle where people look at you as if they're look can kill you. It's like, come on, I don't even know you. And the best way I could describe a racist look is like somebody looking at you as if you came into their house and killed their cat, kind of thing. It's like, what? the first time I saw you. It's like,
Yeah.
but
Right.
you roll with the punches because you got things to do. I can't feed into your hate. But
Yeah.
if you want to confront me verbally, sorry, I'm gonna cut you down.
Yeah.
One time I had this argument with this racist woman. She goes, I don't even understand what you're saying. I said, I'm speaking English. What language are you speaking?
Right.
And it's like that dismissive quality of entitlement.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, so that's what brought me into community organizing. But before that, I went to Hunter College with my older sister was a senior at the time. My second sister was a sophomore, and I was a freshman. So we became involved with organizing third world studies on campus because we were inspired by the people in Berkeley, students in Berkeley,
Mhm.
to take over the buildings to protest the war, and then demand, third world studies like Black, Latin, and Asian American history, which have been left out of quote broad American history. So my sister and Faye, my sister Faye and Larry were part of an organization called Basement Workshop, and the premise was to bring art out of the galleries and into the community. But when we got there, we realized the civil rights movement completely missed our community. So it was up to us to bring up, struggles to promote democratic rights, in education, employment, healthcare, and voting rights, political activism. So that for me, it was that part of my youth or young adulthood was necessary to find out who I am and why I matter. This I knew in my house, because my parents were very supportive of us in our art and our studies and such. But in the bigger world, it was like, it was hit and miss. But I always stress to people, I feel there's more decent people than nasty people out there. And what really impressed me during the pandemic was during the Black Lives Matter movement. All people of all ages came out, especially the young people, even
Mhm.
though it was a pandemic and, we didn't even have the vaccine then. But what was good about the pandemic, it gave us a pause from our busy lives to sit back and really think what was important. You know, um, some people, it was like survival. Some people, it was like deeper questions like you can't sit on a fence anymore. You have to take a side and decide what kind of future you want. So
Do you
that's good.
do you think being in so comic books is it's a subversive art form to begin with, right? So do you feel that your worldview and perspective on that type of thing is something that you take into account when you take jobs and how you I understand not every time, but like is it something that you think about as you work or
Well,
the work that you do?
it's like sometimes you'll catch insensitive writing in the books you get, right?
Hmm.
So
Sure.
Ariana knows as a letterer, we have no editorial control. It's not like I come in and rewrite the character because I don't like what they're saying. So,
There
one of it,
there are
go
times I draw a line in the sand. I remember a few years ago, I got a script and I could tell that the editor hadn't looked at it before it was sent my way. And the writer was trying to evoke kind of like a World War II sense of a character. And he was saying certain things. And I immediately returned it and I said, I'm not working on this. You're either going to have to change this or I'm not going to do this because like it's cut and dry. It's not
it's
cool.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wrong. And sure enough, the editor took a look at it. Is like, oh yeah, ooh, yeah, we're
Oh,
gonna
oh, oh. Thank you for saving my face.
like. When I started out in comics, I kind of assumed everyone knew what they were doing, and I didn't know what I was doing, and that was
Sure.
an absolute wrong assumption to have. And as I grew more experience, I realized it's like I don't know what everyone else is doing, but I know what I do, and I know what my values are in what I do. So I just if anyone's trying to make an assumption and it's the wrong assumption, I'm going to correct them. Like I have to establish my boundaries and communicate constantly because I can never assume everyone knows what they're doing or that everyone knows what everyone else is doing. The only way you can know is by like being clear.
Exactly. You know, the beauty of you being in 2022, it's permissible because people are more sensible,
Yeah.
sensitive. You know, we have sensitivity readers versus like I remember letting an issue with Shang-Chi, and then Fu Manchu shows up as his dad, and you know, I just came out like political movement and reading a lot of philosophy, and I was like, yeah, this is wrong. But you know, it's like at that time it was just beginning. You know, getting back in. So it was like, okay, you know, the only way I made peace was like I'm one of the few Asian people in the industry.
Mhm.
And you know, with a Marvel interview that was released in a podcast recently, it's like if my role was to be a stone to open the door, that's fine. Someone has to be there. Someone has to engage. So
I,
yeah, I push back when it doesn't read right. It's like it's like we don't want this multiplied by how many copies we're printing.
Right. Sure. Well, I want to. So, Ariana, can you talk a little bit about how you got into comics and became a letterer? I'm going to say that you came to my attention, and I know this wasn't the first thing you did, but going to the chapel was kind of my first introduction to you, which was Action Lab, some other Danger Zone or something like that, but written by David Pepose, who's now working for Marvel a lot, and also written drawn by Gavin Guidry, who is also doing some amazing things. And rumor has it there's something DC coming from him, and you as well doing the lettering. And it was a great book, just in general. And you came to my attention there, but I know you'd done. I think you'd done some stuff with Dynamite before then, or I don't know if it
yeah,
got published, but it was right around that time.
yeah, I've done a number of things. Like I didn't expect to become an industry vet, especially because I'm not particularly like I haven't been around a long enough, I thought, but apparently I am. I started in 2010, so like
Mm-hmm.
12 years ago.
Sure.
Um, I don't have a background in art. My background was I'm Brazilian American, but we got stationed overseas,
Mm-hmm.
and dad was an engineer for ships, and I grew up most of my teens and adulthood in Japan and Singapore. So my studies were all in Japanese language and culture. I ended up moving to Kawasaki City to become an interpreter and a translator. And I did that job for several years, but eventually, like, you can understand a culture and be in a culture, but at a certain point, you're going to like feel disconnected. And I was getting to that point of disconnection. So one way of me to find relief was to start a new hobby, basically.
Okay.
And I was always into comics as a kid, even before we got moved overseas. And I loved comics. I loved X-Men was like my big thing, and Batman and all that stuff. And I got back into it because there was like a tiny little comic book shop called Blister in Asakusa. And I would like do my job at City Hall and then hop on a train across Tokyo to like go to my favorite comic book store and buy some comics and just like read something completely out from what my current circumstances was. And I eventually did find reconnection because once I left my job, I moved to Brazil where my mom lives. And I spent time with her out there, and I went through a lot of changes. I came back to the States and tried to find a job, and even in Seattle it's really hard to find a job as like a translator. Eventually I ended up working at Nintendo, but it's grueling work. It's stressful work to be an interpreter. It's just whew. So I continued lettering as like a hobby thing, mostly for friends and stuff. And then about 5 years into it, someone who noticed my work asked me to letter their book for Image.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, early on in my lettering, I did do a book with Image, but it was like a complete mess because the guy's like, oh, I gave you great exposure, and he only paid me like 10% of what I was worth.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
nah,
Did you pocket the rest?
yeah, all I got was like $150 for like $1,500 worth of work I did.
Wow.
They owe you.
In retrospect, and I talked to the guy, and he's like, "Oh, I gave you good exposure," and that's when I was like, "Yeah, well, screw this." And so 5 years, I didn't do anything but stuff that my friends paid me to do,
Sure.
just fun. But then, 5 years in, I do an image book, a new one, and that went well. And I do another one, and it slowly grows. There's an opportunity for me to do a Nancy Drew book with Kelly Thompson on Dynamite.
Sure.
And that's when things really took off for me. I got to do James Bond with Greg Pak. It was friggin' amazing.
And you did the Vita series too, right?
Yes. Vita and Danny did another James Bond series, which was amazing too. That was my last series with Dynamite at the time. And then I moved on and I did stuff with Skybound and other publishers. And then right in the start of 2020, I get an email from Chris, and he says, hey, do you want to work with the Marvel letters? And I took a good assessment of my job at Nintendo, and I realized the only thing I liked about it was my coworkers. So I said, yeah, I'll do it.
Great. And we're better off for it.
Yeah, no, I ended up quitting my day job and making freelance lettering my full-time job in March 2020.
That's fantastic.
Good for you.
At the start of the pandemic. It was a huge change, but
perfect timing.
Yeah.
You're going to be home anyway.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm going to work and I guess that works. So, and the adjustment period was difficult, but the guys at Virtual Calligraphy have all been sweethearts to me. They were mentors for me. They taught me everything I needed to know. Sue Crespi in product management, she kind of took me under her wing when I had a lot of questions on things, like how to distribute, like do all these extra steps that I wasn't used to. And I became a better letterer for it. Like, especially my whole process as a letterer. I used to letter like one issue in the course of like maybe 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Usually like 4 days in the afternoons because I could only do it like part-time with my day job, my 40-hour week with another 40 hours of lettering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Now I would do, like, I used to do like maybe 40 pages a week, and now I do like 150, sometimes 200 pages a week.
So that's a great question. And that's a great topic. And I want to kind of get into. So Janice, you have, spanned the technology, so if someone told you they were lettering 150 pages on boards a week, how would that have gone?
Well, the maximum time would take an hour to do a page on the board. And then sometimes, you get paid with like a sound effect or no copy.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like, usually you look at a script and sort of gauge how long it's going to take. So, when I went back to hand lettering, my son was very young. And one thing I promised myself was I was going to take care of myself health-wise. So I've been training in a gym, weight training for 40 years. Mm-hmm. I go methodically, 4 times a week. And then the days I don't train, I walk 5 miles. Because, we're sitting all the time. And I said to my family, this is not going to kill me. This job will not kill me. So, when I would see a page that was like not heavy a copy or just a sound effect, like, oh, this is my nap, or I can go out. But how I break up my work days, like I do it in the morning, then I take a break, and then like if there's a tight deadline, say like Monkey Prince or Duo, I have to work till midnight, so it'll be like 3 shifts. I break up the day.
Yeah. It's around that too, roughly shifts, I would say.
So, like Meal time's like 15 minutes, right, Ariana?
So,
Yeah.
like, I kind of want to talk a little. I want to, stay a little bit on managing workloads. So one of the things about letterers is you guys have probably one of the most labor intensive and uh, jobs, as well as the sheer volume of it. The Let's be honest, for people listening and anyone listening and watching who has any questions or comments, feel free to hit the comments on Facebook or YouTube. But you guys are the lowest end of the pay scale on the creative team, and to you guys, there, each letterer who is full time is doing a lot of books. So you have a lot of books to do, and there's a lot of labor involved in putting whatever out there. How do you manage that workload? So Janice, you kind of said you break up your day. Do you how do you decide, or how much say do you have over the projects that you work on, and how many projects do you work on at once?
I don't know. It's like spinning plates.
Sure.
Whatever is ASAP or on fire. That's what's taken care of. So when I work with John and Sandy King Carpenter's Storm King Comics,
Hmm.
I'm the lettering department.
Right.
So we have I letter everything. So I talk to my project manager, Sean, to find out what's what's going to be solicited and what's going out first. But the great thing about it is like when work shows up in the folder, I just grab it and do it. It's never too early to get it done. And I hate things on the back burner. If I know it has to be done, I'll do it. It goes back to when I was in first grade. When one Friday the teacher gave us an assignment to hand in for Monday. So across Friday I go home, I start playing. It's a weekend. And then Monday, as we're walking to school, with my older sister, it's like, oh no, the assignment's due. I didn't do it. So I was trying to like write and walk at the same time, which didn't happen. So when I got to the classroom, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get in trouble because she's gonna ask, and she completely forgot it. So that horrible feeling I never wanted again.
Yeah.
So I usually preempt deadlines. I'll ask for more time, but I always come in early. So that's why I'm still employed after 40 years.
Yeah.
That's a big secret, everybody. Meet your deadlines.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how, like, when they ask, like, well, how do you break into comics? It's like, well, that can mean anything for anyone depending on their goals. And then they're like, well, no, how do you get what you are? And it's like, meet your deadlines and communicate. Like those two things. Don't be a jerk. Meet your deadlines and communicate. Because like a lot of other members of the team, they could get some leeway, but when you get to the stage where you need the letterer, there is no more leeway. It got used up. Everyone
Right. Sure.
it's now down to you. So
and the colorist.
yeah.
between the two of us, two
Right.
always solidarity with.
Yep.
And for me, my schedule is a little weirder because my assignments are kind of broken up with like all the other letters on Marvel. Like we're all under the same umbrella of VC, so we all talk and communicate of who's taking what assignments and just kind of stick to those assignments for the most part. And if someone has to go on vacation, we like help carry each other's.
Yeah.
But whatever assignments they give me, I'll take. And sometimes there's like a series that's like, no, please, I want to do that one. Like, let me trade with you. But
so that's a good point.
Good.
That's a really good point. And I want to. It's one of the things I wanted to touch on with Marvel and the way VC works. For those who don't know, VC is the Marvel lettering department essentially, or contractor. How I'm not sure exactly how it works. It's weird to me because I see as a fan and you're reading, you're like VC's Clayton Cowles or VC's Corey Pettit, but like then they're on other things too. So that are not Marvel. But
when I'm on Detective Comics, I don't have VC on it. When I'm on Marvel stuff, it's VC. Yeah.
But one of the things that's I've talked to people about this. I think a couple of people where in the past where if a letterer stays on a particular book, it gives a particular theme and a feel to hold a book together, even if other parts of the creative team may move, especially like if there's fill in artists or a change to the art team, and the letterer staying gives a continuity.
It's an anchor.
Two great examples of that are actually the same person, but Todd Klein's work on Sandman and also on Fables were like a connecting thread for those series. Do you I know you're doing Marauders, right? Are you still on Marauders? Are you on that book for a while? Like,
yeah. I mean, even when we hand off books for someone, like if I'm on vacation, we usually keep a lot of the consistencies because I'm like, oh, I'm going to be off this book, but could you cover this issue? Here's my template, and I'll give them my whole digital template. I'll give them what resources they need. When I took over Detective Comics, it was still in the middle of Mariko Tamaki's whole run. And I was talking to Aditya about it because he had to stop right at the start of their one issue every week for like 12 issues. So I ended up doing a year of issues in like 2.5 months. Wow. And in preparation for that is like, I have to have a spotless template and just like knock it out one after a time. But I needed some like starting resources. So I reached out to Aditya and who was leaving the book at the time. And I was like, can you help me out here? And he's like, oh yeah, here's my template. Here's some things I use. Here's some ideas you can start with. I reached out to Clayton, who still does Batman. And he's like, oh yeah, I have this that I use for this. And that gave me a good starting point. So I built that full template. And even when the team changed over to Ram V's new run, I still use a lot of that template for how I letter to keep some consistency on how those books look.
That's great.
And when it comes to like certain books, sometimes even when you hand over the template, it can be a pain for other people to pick up because I also letter Demon Days for Peach Momoko, and she does this watercolor style that's really unique and not really typical of the Marvel style. So I had to adapt a digital lettering style with like rough edges and like a kind of uneven lines. And it can be a pain to like try to like hand it over to someone else. It's like, oh, can you take care of that? And they're like, what did you do with this template? And it's like, well, you go to the graphic style, and they're like, nope, that's too much. It's like, okay, I'll just do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We had a comment and a question, like, and maybe Janice, you can when you approach a new project.
I letter differently from people who come through like EC or other contract letterers because when we made the transition from hand to digital lettering, the lettering departments became internal, and I was blocked out. Nobody would tell me anything. They wouldn't show me how to use programs. They thought I would die off, basically.
Well, so today you can go get this book. I don't know, has anybody seen this book yet? This is Nate Picos's book, and
I wish I had it 10 years ago. Oh my gosh.
I know we have more resources now, but then it was like, we were using quadras. You know how slow those things were. And Photoshop, you couldn't even save layers at that time in like 96, 97. So we had really primitive software to work with. And then on top of that, no one told me how to integrate, Photoshop, photographer, and Illustrator, except for John Babcock, who was a member of the bullpen. So it took me like 10 years to fight back. So basically, I'm like a third rail lettering. No one has my style. When all the work I do with Storm King, except for some books where they request a certain font, is based on my hand lettering that I translated to. And
how long did that process take, translating your hand lettering style to digital?
Well, I had 1 year of no work, so I translated 40 of my styles into fonts. Okay. So, it was so funny because the first person out the gate and 3 people plagiarized me. So the biggest plagiarist put out this newsletter saying how difficult it was to use a program. And then when I got to that point where, I understood, it's like, God, what a moron. This was so easy. Are you trying to scare us?
Probably.
I'm not scared. But how I decide what lettering style to use is I look at the art, I look at the art directions, I read the script, so I'll get a feel of the cadence and the vibe from it.
Mhm.
So because with John Carpenter's Storm King comics, the majority of things are horror, right? So
Mhm.
there's certain horror where you use like because there's demons, but then there's other horror stories that are more a situation or a feeling of you know not being in control. So there's
So,
different types of horror, and
so you'll make decisions based on the feel or
yeah,
the the pathos of what was going on. So
because
if go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, it's like the main thing I know Ariana has to feel also is the cadence of storytelling, and they'll affect like font size, placement, type of sound effects,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, you have to
So
consider a lot when it comes to that. Like when you know you're entering a series and you're going to have a very wordy writer, that's not going to be a bad thing. You're just going to have to like consider what kind of font you're going to use and the sizes and make sure everything's still legible, but you don't have to end up covering too much of the art with your lettering. Like if
exactly,
like one point size can make a huge difference, but another point size down and it's illegible. So you have to.
exactly, and also like when you put white type on black background, you have to compensate with the kerning because the white will read brighter and close up the spaces between the lettering.
Yeah, yeah, and it
Yeah.
becomes more illegible. Like I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but like one of the bonuses of lettering, it's not invisible, but it is subtle. So sometimes people don't notice as much. Or sometimes people will praise you for something and you're like, no, I really hated how I did that, but thanks.
Yeah,
I
because
want to
I good.
I want to go back to that comment you just made about white on black or white on dark. How do you compensate for that? How do you compensate in the kerning of a particular font?
Oh, it's like an illustrator. You can add more value
Hmm.
between the letters,
So
so
you have to
that
be conscious of that because you're going
yeah.
there. Because do you see that? Do you see it on the screen, or are you just aware of as it prints that way?
Both.
Yeah.
What I don't know if you do this, Ariana. Before I go off to Final Font, I'm lettering till the very last second. I'm always
Mhm.
like moving and adjusting, and sometimes I just like I wear glasses, so my vision obviously not that great, but I just do like a feel to my
Mhm.
face that how a reader would feel it. And if I feel the air is too tight in a balloon, I'm a person I don't like tight balloons around copy. I think it's
Yeah.
annoying as all heck.
Yeah.
It's a disservice to the reader because it's like,
Yeah.
and plus, it's like I don't know when. Well, I guess people who began digital lettering decided that less space is better because you see more art. It's like nah, it makes them reading more
Mhm.
difficult. So
Yeah.
that's a disservice to the whole storytelling process.
I think it becomes more of a chore. The reading becomes more of a chore.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's like our job is like really to find balance between the visual storytelling and
Mhm.
the written language. So
Yeah.
we're the writer's best ally if they don't understand by now. It's
I
like,
think some of them tend to understand. I ran into Teenie Howard, who she wrote Excalibur and Knights of X. I ran into her at Emerald City Comic Con, and when she realized I was her letterer, she like screamed, "It's like, oh my God, you're my secret weapon! How do you put up with me?"
She's a huge proponent and advocate for letterers.
Yeah, because
She's fantastic.
yeah, it's with her scripts. She, especially with the Excalibur series, she's trying to evoke all that Chris Claremont Excalibur stuff. So it's like very, very wordy scripts, trying to evoke a lot of story as well as the
mhm.
art. And the artists on these books are so fabulous that you want to make sure that it
You see
doesn't.
the art, yeah.
So a lot of my job is puzzle solving the script with the art, and it's not. It sounds like a chore, but it's not. Not for me. Like it's fun to try to figure out how am I going to make this work. As you said, if they could.
So
Uh,
that's a great question for you, Liz. We're talking about something like an X book where there are so many different voices and different characters speaking.
yeah, X books are interesting because X books currently are using a Hickman style. Well, we
Mhm.
call it the Hickman style, and
Sure, why not?
Yeah, why not? It's a few font points lower than we would usually do, so it's a little smaller print, and it's all mixed case, and it tends to just be black on white. We don't often put too many different voices in, and on the bonus side, it makes everything consistent throughout all the X books, so that consistency lends itself easily if we need to help each other out with the book. But on the other hand, it doesn't give too many voices, but it does. Even within that, I do find opportunities to make certain characters more expressive in certain ways than expected. Like Hellions is a really good example of that. Hellions is in some senses a really dark book, but in also senses one of their best comedy books.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
The kind of weird slapstick and sinisterness of Mr. Sinister can be really fun when you make his words just pop off the screen and being like, why is he so, like, I can hear Mr. Sinister's voice when I letter him. It doesn't help when my husband peers over my shoulder and starts doing the voice to my ear, and then it's like, oh
no. You may leave. You know, when I'm lettering, I'm in my own universe. You're in the two-dimensional world, and you're trying to hear the voices, and it's reflected by the font choice, size. I guess a classical thing was Ghost Rider, the flaming balloon. And go ahead.
I'm gonna call back because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and as I said earlier, and there were so many books that I remember that were some of my favorite books growing up that you lettered, and I'm just thinking about how the voices in them, particularly like the Iceman book. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a lot of really interesting things I think you did with that, especially the villain and the way that was put together. And like, how do you, what types of things, or how often is it that you have the ability to really craft a balloon style, particularly for a character?
It's like every opportunity I have. It's
Okay.
like with the Monkey Prince, his Piggy Seafood. When he goes into his when he starts philosophizing and gives a big piece of advice, I said he needs a special balloon. So I made this oval that's like sort of flesh colored, and I put little ears.
That's fantastic.
Go check the Monkey Prince series. You know, it's like my view is like, if you hire me to letter, all bets are off. I can do anything I want.
That's fantastic.
I learned that when I created the Ghost Rider balloon, the flaming balloon, everyone was trying to challenge themselves and create different balloons for different characters, and it was such a joy to have that freedom, because you talk about tight lettering. You know that by Squadron Supreme, how tight that lettering was for the copy.
Sure.
But when Mark Grunwald became my editor-in-chief, we had this really freedom to create, and it's like,
I've heard that
when I got the Ghost Rider series, Bobby Chase and Howard Mackey and then Mark Texera, and Greg Wright was a colorist. I kept thinking, why are these people talking to this guy with a flaming skull? If I saw him, I'd run the heck out. It's like, why are they having conversation? So one day I was working in the gym. They say it comes at the unexpected moment. It's like, wait a minute, he deserves a flaming balloon. His head's on fire.
Sure.
So Bobby Chase told me, when I turned in the pages, when she saw it, she called Howard Mackey and said, "Oh my God, you should see what Janice had done." So what it did, it really cued without reading it, he's talking. So I'm really proud of that. Somebody on Twitter questioned whether I did it. It's like, well, look at this guy's version,
Janice
look at my
Chiang.
version, and can you tell the difference?
Yeah.
But anyway, Ariana, you talk. I know we'd have a panel like 5 people, and I would just like sit down.
It just reminds me of a lot of stuff I've done recently, like with Detective Comics. When I started out, I had like the Batman balloon style, and it was like half the bat symbol, and it was the balloon style with his caption style. And it was like kind of gray with black outlines and white text, and it had this look to it. But Detective in particular with Mariko's run had like almost all the Bat characters there, like Nightwing and all of them. And I'm like, well, Oracle has a style, and it's like green with her like symbol, and it's what about Cassandra and Stephanie and Dick Grayson? Like all these characters are popping in. All of them, I'm going to give them all caption styles. But I had to look up their different symbols, come up with different color schemes, and I have like this whole array of captions that I just draw from. It's like, well, this character is talking, so this is their caption. And it was, I don't know if it works or not. That's not for me to say. But
I
fun,
love that
right?
style.
Yeah,
I love that style. Well, I mean, we're kind of talking about this, but one of the questions I had, and a lot of times people spend time talking about negatives, but I really want this to be positive because letters are really, really important. What do you guys find? You can take it either way. What do you find most rewarding about the job that you do?
It's collaboration, that you're part of a process.
You like being part of the team and being part of that putting something together as a group.
Exactly. I mean, that's what keeps me doing it. It's like, I know how to letter a comic. I think I just lettered enough pages to figure it out. But the nature of our work, we can team up with a lot of different people more quickly than say a writer and art team that collaborates for a certain series, because the work is more intense, the drawing and such, and the coloring and the writing. But with us, we come in and we get our bullwhip, snap it, and you can read it, and there we go, right? So I like that.
I love reading comics, so I love that moment when I finish lettering a comic and I'm the very first person to read that issue.
That's fantastic.
Good for you.
You know what happens in the next issue of Excalibur? It's like I'm the only one that knows. The editor is
like,
haven't.
With me, I don't know if you do this, Ariana. Every time I get a deadline, it's like, oh my god! I say to my husband, oh my god, I get this deadline. And I scare myself to clear the palette. It's like I have no preconception. And, I focus on it. And only when I go through final files, I'll stop and look at, hey, that's not bad. That works.
Yeah.
Like I'm in a trance or something until, it's like, okay, final files, it's leaving me. It's like, sending off my son off to college, like, bye.
Yeah. Also, that reminds me of this is a piece of advice I don't often get to give to new letterers, but I would highly recommend is that like when you're starting off lettering and you're not sure about placements, which is for letterers like the most important thing. When a letterer looks at another letterer's work, we know how good they are based on like placements, because that's the rhythm of the whole book. So how you get good at placements is that like you letter an issue or you letter a page and you just stop and you like take a breath and then you look at it again and read it as if someone else worked on it. Like just read it and see if your eyes are actually going the direction you think it's going to go. And if you find your eyes going in the wrong direction of where the text is, like you're distracted by what's going on the page and you're not sure where the next balloon is, like where am I supposed to read next? Then redo it. Like you'll find a new path.
When we learned how to hand letter, the advice given to me was like, look at the books, look at the styles, and if you see one you like, imitate it. It's like learning by looking. So I know in Neil Adams' studio, they would buy everything that was published that week, and they would critique it to see what was working, what wasn't working. The art, the lettering, and such. It was really funny because I left Neil's studio in '74, and I didn't meet up with him until 35 years later at comic convention. I went up to him and he goes, I recognize you. I remember you. I said, yes. He said, it's you. So he did this. He was so sweet. He flipped the book and he just went boom, 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 boom. He said, your work was perfect. And I was really touched because I hadn't seen him in 35 years, but he kept up with me professionally, what I put out there. So, yeah. I was lucky to have really good mentors at the beginning to encourage me.
Something like that. When someone who knows what lettering is or knows what the importance is, and they say, man, you did great with that, then it's like, oh, dang, they know. Like when an editor like says, wow, I really like how you did that sound effect. It's like, thanks. That like me,
It's like you noticed.
you know what I did. You know what that meant because you saw the art before that sound effect was there, and now you see what I did. And often, not people are not going to like know what that is. They're just going to be like, "Man, you do the good thing," and it's like I understand. It's totally okay that you don't know lettering. That's fine.
Exactly.
I appreciate that you appreciate me.
Well, I'm glad to have you guys on, and as I've said to you guys earlier, I am a bit of a lettering nerd. And I usually end up talking about lettering, and lettering kind of makes is the thing that turns a lot of times turns over whether I love a book or not. Like there was a particular sound effect in one book that I was reading, and it just hit me in such a sweet way. And a lot of times people will say things like, that the lettering should be invisible. Like you shouldn't even notice the lettering, which while that makes sense to a certain degree. So it's not taking you out of the book, but to appreciate it, just like a great panel, a great action scene, or a poignant moment in the art, or a turn of phrase from the writer can take you out of a book, and that doesn't detract from the book. Like, so I remember there was this particular sound effect that somebody had put in, and it was just it was the sound of heels running on a floor. And I'm like, man, I could hear it. I could hear the way that worked through, and it makes a difference. I want to come back to one thing, because you were talking about placement, and how often is it that you will get balloon placement from an editor in terms of where they think it should go? And I know that there are. I don't know that that's happening at Marvel, but I do know that there are editors, and that was something that people did.
Yeah. DC does it. Marvel stopped doing it. I don't know how far back, but by the time I joined, they don't do it anymore. They just hand us the art, they hand us the script, and they're like, "Go for it," and we go for it. Okay. But and that's very freeing. With DC, they will send me placements like, "We want it here, here, here," or sometimes they'll ask me ahead of time, "Do you want placements?" and we go from there. But I tend to letter intuitively to how I feel the script and the art are working together. And then after I'm done and I'm like reviewing my work before I send everything out, I'll take a look at what their placements were. And if there's like a simple thing where it's like, well, I could change it over to there, that works too, then I'll do it, just to show that like I'm not being a complete rebel. But for the most part, I just stick to what I do, because they can say, hey, 1, 2, 3, this looks great, but the script is like so massive, it doesn't fit on that side of the panel, or the rhythm is completely off or lopsided if I do it that way. So I just kind of
a lot of times I'll break up a balloon if it's like a blimp. It's like, come on, you need some air.
or there's like this tiny panel for like this huge paragraph, and I'm like, I can break that up and put a little bit here and a little bit there on the other side of the panel, and it's still.
Some cases I just have to move it to the next panel. If you don't want to edit, it cannot live in this artwork because it's going to cover everything.
Yeah.
And it's the same with me. It's like at DC, some editors will give me balloon placements, but when we were doing hand lettering, some of the writers would do the balloon placement for us. Or the editor, but that was different because you couldn't route out the lettering once it was on the artboard, so it was more crucial that we had understanding how it was going to be placed. Plus, and that way also the inker didn't have to over ink unless we were totally late and we lettered on vellum, and they took snow cake and painted the back and cut it out and used rubber cement and put it down. That was literally layout. Yeah, but with digital lettering, it's more flexibility in terms of like moving. You don't have to erase something, just like move it.
Yeah. There's more flexibility there. It's like, well, I don't want to fight over this. I'll make this look this way how they want it to see. But if I deeply feel it's like, no, this is going to make the rhythm work, I choose, and no one fights me on it.
Yeah, same here. It's like, well, if you think your way is better, go for it. I don't think so.
So we've kind of talked about this, and one of the things that I wanted to talk to you, Janice, or kind of bring to or get your opinion on is what are the what's the best thing about digital lettering as compared to hand lettering, and what is the thing that you miss most about hand lettering, or is there anything
What's the best thing about digital lettering?
comparing it to hand lettering on the boards?
Well, it's sort of like asking to choose who your favorite child is.
Okay,
Each
that's
one is
fair.
unique.
That's a
Each one is
fair,
unique, right? I mean,
right?
it's like there's some people who hated the transition from hand to digital lettering, feeling it was very mechanical. But then, we have the freedom of color that we didn't have on the
Sure.
boards. So, and all the filters we can use. But, it's like, whether it's like, okay, when you're doing hand lettering, you have to be so conscious because ink is like, has a mind of its own.
Mhm.
Say when you're lettering on a humid day, you better have the air conditioning on or else it'll just like spread. And you pray that no one's been eating fried chicken or potato chips before they touched your paper. Because you'll be lettering about pools. It's like, oh my God, someone was eating and touching this. Um, my
Does
my
that
point of
happen?
many times. My point of pride is like I never spilled food or anything on my paper page, the board pages, because I never ate at my table. Other people have. So each has its particular strength and weakness. Um, but there's a beauty in both forms if you look for it.
Mm.
So how I try not to make my digital lettering mechanical, I guess, because it's like Duo. You've seen
Mhm.
that book. I do more drawing on those balloons, so it feels like hand lettering. So I said to my husband, "Well, this Duo series, the special telekinetic balloons, it feels like I'm doing Ghost Rider
Cool.
as a hand lettering, but this is a digital version of the Ghost Rider balloon." So yeah, I was lucky. I was able to work on the Spider-Man series, that was carried in the newspapers. So that brought me back to hand lettering.
So, how long ago did you stop doing that then?
When Stan Lee passed away, they
Okay.
stopped the series. So I was on the series like 6 years, the daily and then the Sunday version also. So I got to work with Joe Sinnott, Alex Saviak, and Stan's brother Larry
Mhm.
Weaver and Stan. So that was nice as in the arc of what I've been able to do. That was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Did
are
I answer
there?
your question?
Yeah, it did. No, it's a fair listen. Any answer is fair enough for that. Like I said, you're right. I mean, it is two different disciplines. There aren't people who learned to do it the way you did at that point. There are very few people who continue to do it. I think pretty much John Workman's the only one who does, and that's only because he's working with Walter,
Walter.
who's still on boards. So that's how that works. But he also works digitally as well. He works in kind of a hybrid mode at times. I know that. Um, but one of the questions I wanted to think are there letterers that, and you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but if you want to, you can. Are there letterers that you um, stand out to you as someone who is exceptional consistently, or historically, that you had someone that you said, this is since it's letter appreciation day, is there a letterer you want to appreciate who's not with us right now?
It's hard to pick favorites.
Sure.
It's hard to pick favorites. I feel like it's disingenuous, but like I'll talk about like current letters just of my peers. Like whenever I see something Hassan or Aditya has put out, they
Mhm.
have quality to their sound effects where I think they work a lot in Photoshop to put in a lot of hand-drawn effects into it and give it a lot of a naturalistic feel. Hassan's always inventing something new. And
He is one of my favorites. I
yeah.
mean, I have favorites, and he is definitely up there.
Um, all of the VC guys really impressed me because of how much work they have to output, particularly Clayton, because he's also like doing stuff over at DC too, like I am. And it's just like, how do you have time? I always feel like I'm drowning, and he always seems like He's got it under control.
Well, listen, I'm gonna let's take 1 second just to talk about Clayton, because I'm gonna do something here. I have let's see, on my letterer folders. How do I get rid of this? Oh, get rid of that. I have in my database there are 9,545 comics, and if I sort it by letterer, by the most things, which I can, Clayton has 578.
Yeah.
And he's 200 ahead of Corey, who is second.
I think I've only lettered 200 issues since I joined Marvel.
That's all.
But yeah, it's just an amazing amount of output. And then there's a whole bunch of new guys. Like I would say of my lettering style, the person who came up at the same time as me and who has a style that's very similar to my own. The kind of guy who, like, when I'm asked to do a job and I do not have any more room on my plate, I always like, oh, you're looking for a letterer that does the style I do. I always recommend Lucas Catoni. He's got Argentina. He's amazing at what he does. And he's still like overlooked a lot in his work. And it's only recently he's getting more attention, especially because it was really special. The DC Comics did their, I almost said Voices because Marvel does that, but like they did their DC Pride, and they made special attention to make sure that all the, like, not just the writers and artists and colorists, but also the letterers were also, everyone was clear as well, like, you know. And so it got to be me and Aditya and Lucas and Frank got to all be letterers on that book. And letterers don't get to work together. We get to work with like everyone in the industry. The letterers don't get to work together. But just being in the same anthology together, like with all my favorite people, like, well, some of my favorite people, I'm not going to say all, but like some of my favorite letterers in the industry, was like really special to me. And with this year's Voices as well, like I lettered half of the anthology for Marvel because I did the year's previous Pride issue as well, the whole thing, and that was special to me. But Clayton actually stepped in and lettered 2 of the stories as well, because the day that I was supposed to letter those 20 pages, I got terribly sick and I had to go to the emergency room. And I was there all evening. So he was like, where's the files? I'll take over. So that issue is special to me because I remember being in need and having, you know,
safety net, yeah,
in and help me out. So it's like a special place in my heart. So yeah, those are just a few of the people. There's like Gabriella, there's Jody, Gilly, are all like amazing women in the industry who are just starting out and stuff. So whenever the people reach out to me, it's like, oh, we got this all-girl team. And like, I can be a cynic about it, but you know, sometimes they want to have an all-girl team for their book. Yeah. And it includes the letter. So I'm like,
we can do that. It's all right. Let it happen.
Yeah, I'm not the only woman who's in this industry. Here's a long list of people I know who may have opportunities to like pick up your book. Because even though we're lettering a lot, I feel like there's always room for more letterers to enter the fray because, you know, like Janice said, it can wipe you out if you don't have the right constitution for it. And it can cycle you through quickly if you're not ready for it. But if you have the passion for it and you meet those deadlines and you communicate, you can last a long time. And if that's the case, we have to look out for each other. Because who else is going to look out for the letterers?
I know.
Well, absolutely. One of my, you know, if anybody follows me on social media, I've been to a bunch of cons this year, and not enough letterers at cons. And I anytime I talk to anybody who's a promoter, there are not enough letterers and there are not enough colorists at cons. We're
there. We're not tabling.
Yeah, we're in the aisles.
That's the problem. That is a problem. Like
I have my Storm King booth. You can find me.
Yes. Well, yes. You're sitting on Sandy's couch. I understand.
No, I'm signing. I'm working.
I will see you. I'll come visit you in New York.
Great.
But like, how do we fix that? Do you think it's necessary? I mean, like it is. I think that.
I think there's a genuine interest to have letterers panels, except I don't think they get accepted often to be considered in conventions. Just like, oh, here's a panel and it's all letterers. But it's like, we have a lot of interesting things to say about the industry that people don't know.
Sure.
And I think they would benefit from that. I don't know if I would table at a, I mean, my husband, he's a colorist, but he's also makes his own books as well. So when he starts tabling, once the, we're not going to table during the pandemic, but once things calm down more and we're ready to table on our own, yeah, I'll join him there. And, I'll think of something. I have this idea that I'm going to dress up in a blue dress and I'm going to put a little like cardboard thing that looks like Lucy's advice, like psychiatrist.
Sure.
Letters advice, and it'll be like a little tip jar, and anyone can come up to me and ask about comics, and I'll tell them proper page size for comics to draw in and stuff like that.
I was up at Albany Comic Con, local convention in New York, and they asked me to table, and I was like, so, because I never tabled, I never ordered books or whatever that I worked on. So I said, okay, let me print out some of the stuff, like Ghost Rider or whatever, because they're in boxes. I'm not going to unearth the box, and I'll have them out. So anyway, there was a run on me drawing Ghost Rider balloons for people, and it was so much fun.
That's fantastic. That's great.
People were asking. One man asked me to put his and his wife's name in there. I did one for a gallery. That's so
great.
I also went on, I was like, my God, there's Ghost Rider balloons, and people started commissioning balloons. So Ariana, there is a market if you go out there.
Yeah, I have to, like, different letterers do table at times, and they come up with really creative ideas. I know Micah would sell pins and other things as well as his comps, and
I have some of Micah's pins.
I remember there was she was a digital hand letterist for Lumberjanes. I would see her at Rose City Comic Con, and she would have some of her comps for sale, but for the most part, she would make clay pottery.
Really?
Okay.
Sally,
multi-talented.
Anything artist Sally. If it's cool and it's art, people will love it.
The other thing I thought was like, yeah, I'll get my computer. What's your name? I'll do your name like in my digital font, like a logo, and you get the digital file or printout. But that's one way to do it. But I was not going to carry a printer.
So let's touch on one more thing. I don't want to keep you guys too long because I know you're probably on deadlines. But what about logos? So how often do you get that opportunity? And what do you do as you approach a logo?
For me, it's digital. So I tend to recommend other people to do it because I do logos sometimes. I just don't feel as confident in it as I am with my lettering work. Because you know what? That's a whole other muscle. Like a whole other area that I need to make my own time to explore and really feel confident in. So I tend to recommend other people who I know like specialize in it, because that's the designer aspect of comics is almost its own thing now. It's a whole other area. Like Mueller and them are a whole thing as well. So I don't do it that often because
with hand lettering, I was looking at some old books. And I was looking at the titles that I'd done. I said, darn, that's pretty good. I don't remember. It's like the Iceman language he said I'd done for that character. I don't remember because, the book I'm working on is my favorite book. If anybody asks what your favorite book is, it's one I'm working on. And I don't remember anything else in the rear view window. It's done. My name's on it. I must have done it. So, so in those days, the guys would, take the logo jobs because it was not a lot of work for a lot of money. But what Ariana said is the way graphic design is now with digital format, it's a discipline in itself. And it's like I could figure out a logo in terms of letter form, like drawing it out and stuff.
Sure.
But in terms of my knowledge of Photoshop, it's not advanced enough to realize it to what a logo should look like now. But so usually I decline because the learning curve for me will take me away from deadlines.
Okay.
I'll just like no, no, thank you, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to look like crap.
Yeah. Fast, we're efficient, and we get a lot of quantity books out with great quality in them. But when it comes to something that is so specific that you have to like stop and pause and really put a lot of creativity and artisan like art into, because you know that's going to be on every issue,
Right.
you tend to recognize your limitations, because there's going to be someone out there who specializes in graphic design and Photoshop in a way that's so skilled that like when they put out logos, they're known as a logo person. And those graphic designers in comics are often not recognized, just like flatters in colorists.
Yeah,
like
sure.
the flatters are amazing. My husband flats a lot of stuff and he doesn't get credits for it, and it's like it's frustrating.
Yeah, the colors in Photoshop now, the painting.
Yeah.
It's not like the old Doc Martin guys where color coding. You're actually like fleshing out the art.
Yeah, and it's
that's the best part of our job too. We get to look at the color files like really close up.
It's so exciting because like I have it linked up in my templates with the same name. So when I am lettering over inks, everything's in black and white and it looks cool and all. But then they send me the color files and I just paste it into the folder, overwrite all the ink files with the color files, and I open up my template to like look at the new lettering files, and it's like so pretty.
At Storm King, when I find final color art, it's like Christmas. It's like we have the best jobs.
Yeah. And that's kind of the flexibility with sound effects now, is that like for me, a lot of the times when I either want the sound effect to be subtle, so I don't want it to contrast too much, or if I want it to be really loud, so I want it to be like contrasted significantly, getting to see the color art and like color sample from that artwork to try to like get that range and saturation I want.
You need that palette. You need the palette to, even the caption fills or balloon fills you want to do, you have to know the color. It's like,
sure.
But
yeah.
It's funny. It's like sometimes I'll get black and white or even thumbnails. And for some reason, I can intuit the color. I was like, oh, okay, it works.
That's one of the things that I love so much about the way digital lettering has evolved, that it's become a much more artistic part of it. Taylor did a book, I think it was for Dark Horse. It was with Aubrey Sitterson, and what he did with those balloons was just like it just spoke to me. It was really, really amazing. It was something about it's got like eight words in the title, like we can't last fight or something like that, whatever. But it was really excellent.
I think I know the one.
Vico Ossio did the art in it.
Yeah. I think I know the one. I forget the name, but I remember what Taylor was doing in that one.
Yeah, it was really excellent. I want to, and I don't know if we're gonna get this, but I have a question. This is me. I like to talk about like comics history and weird things and stuff like that. And so I'm gonna ask Janice to remember. So you lettered the ElfQuest books for Epic. Did you letter the original books for Warp?
No.
Okay, so you just did
Siege of Blue Mountain. I did.
Well, no, I think did you on the original Epic? I know you're on the Siege of Blue Mountains books, but like on the original Epic run where they converted it from the magazine size down to comic size, did you re-letter those pages?
Did I do it? I don't know.
It says you did. Like I have all of them, and so
like many years ago, I don't know. If I looked at it, I would know if it's my hand. It's like my handwriting evolved over the years. One of my mentors, Mori Kiramoto, when I came back in 1980, said, well, it's going to take you like 3 years to get your own style. I was like, okay, 3 years, I could bear it. And then it took me 10 years, actually, to have it, evolve to the point where people know my hand lettering without seeing who the credit for it. So I'm most proud of that. too.
according to this, you did do the lettering on like 11 to 15, 16, and then a few more of the ones. It was 32 issues, but like that doesn't mean it's not more than that, because the database tends to not credit
Sometimes
letterers, unfortunately. But like that was a curious thing, because those books were reprinted. They were originally in magazine size, black and white, and then reprinted from Marvel under their Epic banner down to a different size. I was wondering if they needed to be relettered.
I don't know. I don't remember.
That's okay. That's fine. I think that's one of the things that, like, part of the things, something that will happen today. I mean, I guess in different ways. Like, is there ever a time when you may, or either of you may have been asked to go back over something and for resizing?
Yep. When it comes to like, I finish a book and they're like, actually, we're going to do a different page size.
Yeah.
Reletter is like, that's a nightmare. And I hate that. So I try to make sure we have the page size established before we start a book.
Exactly.
But there's this new thing going on where you'll have webtoons and covers and the Marvel Infinite style. And we're doing a lot of these vertical comics now. I did a Wiccan and Hulkling vertical comic recently, which was a good series that was running on Marvel Unlimited. Got people into Marvel Unlimited so they can read it. And you scroll through, and it's an interesting way to tell the story because you can hit the rhythms and beats of the story in a whole new way. And it gives you a lot more like freedom of movement with your lettering. You're not gonna worry too much about like space or art. You can like just kind of freeform. It's a lot faster to do. So that was nice and easy lettering. And then they decided to also print it.
Right.
They were doing these vertical comics, and a production team went and broke down that vertical panels into a regular space comic. So they had to come up with a rhythm that worked for them. And then they handed it back to me. And I still had my original lettering files that I had to go from sized up to size it down.
Right, because on the vertical, on the phone, it's much bigger, right?
172% or so. And so I had to size it back down, put it all together, and like sit with the pages and be like, okay, I have to like reconfigure
it.
Sure.
Re-see it.
all the cheats I had before where I'm like, oh, I can just have this float outside the panel and it's fine. It's like, oh no, I gotta like back
That's
in.
a second invoice.
Oh no, I definitely got paid for that. Trust me. But that's a new thing that I'm getting used to. So it's something I'm kind of aware of. Also, a couple of things. Chris's run on Hawkeye, that famous run on Hawkeye with David Aya and all that work, that got turned from its regular comic book form into a scrolling vertical comic.
Oh, wow.
So they had someone in production to like make it tell the story vertically and put like more space between the panels, have it flow downwards. And it was my job to take Chris's original lettering files and pull them over into this new format and like reconfigure it so it's still telling the same story and same rhythm as the original book, but in this new format. So I had to like buy the graphic novel and like sit with it and like study it.
That should be provided.
Well, they also have Marvel Unlimited too that I could have followed as well, but I just kind of like wanted it on my hands, and it probably would have taken too much time for them to buy it and send it over to me. So I was just like, I just went to
just grab it.
Yeah, I just went to my local comic book store and just asked for it. And it's just like, okay.
Again, goes on the invoice.
Well, it's tax deductible. But like it's interesting because now they want to meet people in the middle because like digital comics is a thing now, and it's definitely reaching a new audience. Like I realized that when my friend came to visit me, when I was going to get married, she came from like another state to visit me, and she has like 3 kids, 4th on the way. So she doesn't have time to sit and read comics. But while she was visiting me, I saw her scrolling through her phone, and I'm like, oh, what you reading? And she's like, oh, this great comic. And I was looking, and it's a webtoon. It's like cute romance comics on webtoons. And she's like, oh, I just love this story. And she's just like scrolling through and eating it up because she can keep an eye on her kids and scroll through her comics and like read whenever she has a chance instead of trying to pick up a single issue
Yeah.
and through while our kids are running.
Yeah, it's
You
funny.
know? You can
Dean-
juggle that out.
Make sure they set the house on fire.
So,
Dean Haspiel and I were talking once
The
about
flooding.
how
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Dean Haspiel and I were talking once about how, like, when we were kids, we used to like read our comics while we were in the toilet, and now we just sit on our phones and scroll through on our same thing, same place to read comics.
Spot.
It's a perfect spot, exactly.
Yeah.
The comics
And
are
nothing else to
elevated
do.
now.
Yeah, exactly. Evolved for whole new ways to read on the toilet.
So, I think we're gonna wrap this up. But thank you, ladies. I cannot tell you how happy I am that we were able to do this, and to celebrate you guys in this field, and to celebrate comics. And I hope that someday we'll get together in person to do this maybe again sometime. If ever I'm at a show and I'm doing panels, I'll make sure I get you guys on them, because
Oh yeah.
we need to talk about it. I think that it's underrepresented and it's underappreciated. And I just, anybody who reads a comic, take a minute and experience the work and the craft and the thought that goes into putting letters on the page, in the balloons, the way the balloons are shaped, the way they're placed. All of those things add to the experience of reading a comic. And if you don't know that, then you should take that time. And thank you again. Is there anything that you guys want to plug here? I mean, I've been kind of putting your Twitter and handles and stuff like that as we've been through, so people should follow you guys, because you got some interesting things on your social media platform. And
well, I'm very passionate about like comics reviewers and readers who are interested in understand, like they don't have to become a letterer, but if they want to understand why lettering is important, how to tell good lettering in a book and stuff, and they ever have questions about it, they can just DM me on Twitter. That's my main, like all my info is there. If you want to reach out to me, I love answering questions on stuff like that. And books I'm on recently, I'm really happy about Demon Wars coming out, because all my favorite people are working on, my favorite editors and my favorite writer and my favorite artists all in one team. Until the next book comes out and that becomes my favorite. But like this right now is my favorite. I also really love all my X-Men books that I'm working on right now, and Detective Comics is really epic at the moment. So check out my work.
Great.
Okay, last minute plug. Well, I'm the lettering department for John and Sandy King Carpenter's Storm King Comics, and I'm really proud of our Halloween Nights anthology. We're on volume 8, and every year we have John writing lead story, and then Sandy's writing last one. So a book ended between two Carpenters. But I've been so fortunate to be able to collaborate with Sandy, who's our editor-in-chief and CEO, because the work you see in there is nothing you will see in any other comic book, because it's individual to me. And as I said, I'm the third rail of lettering. I do not look like a house letterer.
I think I appreciate that. I appreciate you highlighting Storm King, because they are doing some amazing things, and you are as well. Do you? I don't know off the top of my head, but do you letter the Storm Kids line as well?
Yes, I do. It's
and there's one coming out this week, I think.
Yeah, Stanley and the Enchanted Forest, and then Stanley and his friends actually got an Eisner nomination for a single issue. So I'm really proud of the team on that. Yeah. Well, I worked on Superman Smash of the Clan, so Gene won that one also.
Yeah, that was amazing. Congratulations.
I love the story. It was so timely too.
Yes,
the subject matter.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. Well,
thank
you for this opportunity. And nice meeting you, Ariana. I'll see you at a convention one day.
Yeah, definitely. I hope we get to hang out in the future. It was so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. I know we're going to have fun.
I'm glad I brought you together. So there you go.
So I'll see you in New York, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
And happy Letterers Day.
Thank you. Take care.